The dust of the open range settled heavy on Jacob's shoulders, but it was the weight of the last 3 days that truly bowed his head. 3 days since Sarah, the spirited daughter of the neighboring Miller farm, had vanished without a trace. Her horse had returned to the stable wild-eyed and riderless, its saddlebags empty. The whole county was out looking, a grim procession of ranchers and farmhands, but Jacob felt a personal sting. He'd known Sarah since they were kids, trading stories over fence posts and racing their ponies across the prairie. He reined in his stallion Jericho atop a wind-swept mesa, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of blood orange and deep purple. From this vantage point, he could see for miles. Nothing. Just the endless stretch of unforgiving land. He'd followed every broken twig, every disturbed stone, every sign a man could read. The tracks were faint, muddled by the passage of other searchers, but he'd found something earlier that day, a small blue ribbon tangled in a thorny mesquite bush. It was the same ribbon Sarah had worn in her hair at the town dance last month. A cold dread coiled in his gut. This wasn't a simple case of getting lost. The trail, what little he could piece together, spoke of a struggle. It led away from the known paths, deeper into the Badlands, a place where only outlaws and desperation dared to tread. As darkness began to claim the land, Jacob knew he couldn't stop. He lit a lantern, its single flame a defiant spark against the encroaching night. He had to find her. For the Millers, for the county, for the memory of a girl with sunshine in her hair and a laugh that could chase away the shadows. Days turned into a week. Jacob's supplies dwindled, his face becoming a mask of dust and grim determination. He was now far into the territories, a lawless expanse where a man's life was worth less than the water in his canteen. He found the remnants of a small campfire, the ashes barely cold. Nearby, another clue, a discarded tin of peaches, a brand only sold at the general store back home. And beside it, the faint imprint of a woman's boot, much smaller than the scuffed prints of the men who had been with her. They were close. He urged Jericho forward, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. The trail led him to a narrow canyon, its walls rising like ancient sentinels. Tucked away in a deep recess, almost invisible against the rock, was a dilapidated line shack. A thin curl of smoke rose from its crooked chimney. This was it. Dismounting quietly, Jacob unholstered his Colt, its familiar weight a cold comfort in his hand. He crept toward the single grimy window, every nerve alight. Inside, 2 rough-looking men sat at a crude table, playing cards. A third stood by the hearth, stirring a pot. And then he saw her. Sarah. She was huddled in a corner, her dress torn, her face pale and smudged with dirt. But her eyes, they still held a flicker of the fire he knew so well. A wave of relief, so powerful it almost buckled his knees, washed over him, quickly followed by a surge of cold fury. He didn't have time for a plan. He kicked the door in, the wood splintering with a deafening crack. "Looking for something that doesn't belong to you," Jacob growled, his voice low and dangerous. The men scrambled for their weapons, but Jacob was faster. The canyon echoed with the roar of gunfire. When the smoke cleared, Jacob stood alone, the air thick with the smell of gunpowder. He rushed to Sarah's side, his hands gentle as he untied her ropes. "Jacob," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I knew you'd come." He helped her to her feet, his arms securely around her. "Let's get you home, Sarah." But as she took a step, she gasped and stumbled, her face contorting in pain. "It's my ankle," she said through gritted teeth. "I think it's broken." Jacob carefully knelt down, his touch surprisingly gentle as he examined the swollen joint. It was bad. He couldn't risk her riding all the way back like this. Looking around the squalid shack, his eyes landed on a pile of discarded lumber and rope. An idea formed. He would build a travois, a simple sledge, to pull behind Jericho. He worked quickly, his hands sure and practiced. As he was lashing the last poles together with a piece of worn leather, Sarah spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. "It hurts. Down there, too." She gestured vaguely towards her lower leg, hidden beneath the folds of her skirt. Jacob's hands stilled. A different kind of fear, sharp and immediate, pierced through him. He paused, looking at her with concern. "Where, Sarah? Show me." Hesitantly, she lifted the hem of her torn dress just enough to reveal her calf. Jacob pulled back the fabric to get a better look, and froze. Embedded deep in her flesh were two small, angry puncture marks, the skin around them swollen and unnervingly dark. A rattlesnake bite. And from the look of it, it wasn't recent. The poison was already working its way through her system. The broken ankle was nothing compared to this. They were miles from any doctor, with time slipping away like sand through his fingers. Panic threatened to overwhelm him, but he forced it down. He was a rancher. He knew the land, and he knew its dangers. He looked at Sarah, her face now pale and beaded with sweat, her breathing becoming shallow. He had to act, and he had to do it now. He grabbed his knife from his belt, its blade glinting in the dim light. "Sarah, listen to me," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "This is going to hurt, but you have to trust me." He made a swift, shallow incision over the bite, just as his father had taught him to do for snake-bitten cattle. It was a desperate, old-world remedy, one he prayed would work on a person. He then took his bandana, tying it tightly above the wound to slow the poison's spread. He lifted her, ignoring her cry of pain, and placed her gently on the newly built travois. "Hold on, Sarah," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Just hold on." He mounted Jericho and began the long, agonizing journey back. He pushed the horse and himself to the limits of their endurance, racing against the venom coursing through Sarah's veins. He talked to her constantly, keeping her awake, telling her stories of their childhood, promising her sunrises and dances and a future free from this canyon. He didn't know if she could hear him, but he couldn't stop. He wouldn't stop. After what felt like an eternity, they saw the flicker of lights in the distance. The Miller farm. A cry of hope escaped Jacob's lips. He urged Jericho into a final desperate gallop. As they burst into the lamp-lit yard, Mr. and Mrs. Miller ran out, their faces a mixture of joy and terror. "The doctor!" Jacob yelled, his voice hoarse. "Get the doctor! She was bitten!" The next few hours were a blur of frantic activity. The doctor arrived, working feverishly over Sarah. Jacob could only stand by, helpless, his hands stained with the dust and blood of his ordeal. Finally, as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, the doctor emerged, his expression weary, but hopeful. "She's strong," he said, clapping a hand on Jacob's shoulder. "The fever's broken. You got her here just in time, son. Another hour. Well, let's not think about that. You saved her life." Jacob finally allowed himself to breathe. He walked out onto the porch, the rising sun warming his face. He had faced down outlaws and stared death in the eye, all for the girl who was now sleeping peacefully inside. Looking out at the vast, open range, he knew he would do it all again in a heartbeat. The prairie could be a hard, unforgiving place, but it was also a place of resilience, courage, and a love as boundless as the sky above, and that was something worth fighting for. Thanks for watching our story today. If you enjoyed this tale of the Wild West, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage and adventure. We'll see you on the next one.